Good morning. Delight to be here, delight to be home. And I was thinking as we were driving here, I think the first time I came to speak at Unity Birmingham was about 36 or 37 years ago. So the first thing I'd like to do is just take a moment of silence and remember the person who I was most associated with at Unity Birmingham, that many of you I'm sure knew, and that's Jerry Bartholow. So I'd like to take just a moment and whatever Jerry's Spirit is doing and he's up to, that we send him that platform of love and that energy of love and support and caring and appreciation for everything that he gave us. He was a magnificent teacher, spiritual guide. So Jerry, whatever you're doing, thank you. And this morning we're going to talk about the 5 urgent Aramaic keys of the man named Yeshua. In our culture, they call him Jesus, but that wasn't his name. His name was Yeshua, and he spoke the Aramaic language. Is there anybody here who can name one world religion started out of in the English language? Greek, Latin, Arabic. There are none. Interesting. At least 6 of the world's major religions started out in the same language. Is it possible that there's something in that language, if you understand it at its root, is missing from all of the other world's languages? I'm the director of a foundation that's translating a copy of the oldest known New Testament in Aramaic into the English language. I've worked with that manuscript for almost 40 years, and there's still things that are difficult to say in English. An example of that would be let's imagine that somebody here, you, any one of you, is the best translator of, let's say, Russian into English and English into Russian in the world. And we have a friend who emails the church and says they want to fly in from Russia to do this week of workshops. Knowing that you translate and speak Russian, we ask if you will house this person. We know you've got an extra room at home. And if you'll pick him up at the airport and translate for him, which you're just delighted to do. Once or twice during the week, we get together for lunch with him. We go out for dinner one night. At the end of the week, having had an absolutely awesome time with this gentleman, I want him to know what I think of him. And I don't speak any Russian. So I ask you if you will tell him that I think he is just really cool. And you turn to him in your best Russian and tell him that Michael thinks he's got a low body temperature. You translated my words perfectly, but you didn't say a word about what I meant. If Yeshua sat in most churches today in the Western world, he'd say, "That's all Greek to me." People have actually been convinced that it was all originally written down in Greek. Now, does anybody here know any Semitic peoples? Can you imagine a Semitic person, a group of Semitic peoples who have developed this flower of spirituality, turning to the Greeks and saying, "Would you guys write it down for us? We really don't know how." And it's ludicrous. But you will find such staunch resistance to that, I think probably because everybody who's a Greek scholar, and that's all the ivory towers in America pretty much, when they finally acknowledge that you can't speak Yeshua in Greek, they lose their status as experts. Now, there was an interesting movie. I don't particularly recommend it as a movie because it's pretty violent. I like to go to violent movies because I find that, actually I was guided one day. There was a time period where I never touched a violent movie, and I was guided to go to one that was pretty disgusting, actually. And I resisted doing that. My guidance was clear, do it. And as I sat in the theater and crazy unfolding, it's like, what am I doing here? And the response was, Michael, you have a belief in a world of bodies. You have a belief in all kinds of suffering and death. Sit here and breathe and forgive. Sit here and breathe and remove from yourself everything that never belonged within your structure. Every thought, every idea, every belief that never belonged in you. You might listen to Paul on this topic. He sums it up in a simple phrase. He says, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. But you'll notice that Greek theology has come in and told people, well, there's this formula, and you have to go kneel in front of an altar and you have to say magic words to a magic man. Now, if that's true, and you look at every person that Yeshua worked with 2,000 years ago in the scriptures, the woman at the well, the woman with the issue of blood, Lazarus, according to that theological belief, they're all in hell because they didn't follow the formula. None of them did. Does that make any sense? The Greek formula is not the teachings of Yeshua. And that's a really important point to understand, because if you believe that's the key, you won't go get the key. You know, if I say, I've got a brand new Mercedes sitting waiting for you, here's the key for it, and it's in the parking lot A, and you have no idea where parking lot A is, are you ever going to jump in that Mercedes and drive away? It's not going to happen. This man, Yeshua, had a way of understanding how this human organism worked. And until you get to understand the thoughts behind the experience and the tools, you can't go there. The movie that I mentioned is called The Accountant. Again, I don't particularly recommend it unless you're ready to do some deep forgiveness work. But the reason I bring it up, at the end of the movie, there was a song, and there was one line in the song that just knocked my socks off.
You're not wearing socks.
Well, okay, I don't wear socks, but metaphorically. But the line in the song says, you can't read a book you haven't written. You can't read a book you haven't written. In other words, if you don't have the experience that the writer of the book has, you can't know what that writer means. You can get some kind of a framework, some sort of a picture of how to go there, but you've got to go there yourself to have the experience. There's a particular chapter in Luke, chapter 10:25, where a scribe, now a scribe is a very educated person, someone who works with the scriptures all the time, knows the words inside out and backward. And this scribe steps up to test Yeshua. Now, as I quote this, I'm going to invite you to notice a couple of things. One, Yeshua knows he's being tricked. Yeshua knows the man already knows the answer to the question. So he reflects the question back to the man. And then when the man answers the question, he doesn't say, that's right. That's the right answer to the question. Notice that he doesn't say that. What he does say to the man is, you spoke the truth. And then he tells the man, now here's a guy who's so acquainted with the scriptures, but he can't read the book because he hasn't written it. He can't read the book because he hasn't had the experience. And then what Yeshua does in the last line of this particular passage is he explains to the man the question that his answer answers. And it's not the one about eternal life. So let's look at that passage. Luke 10:25. A scribe stood up to test him, saying, "Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life?" Yeshua said to him, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" You notice the guy already has the answer. And the man answers and says, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." Now, that's the Greek translation. We'll correct that in a few minutes because that's not what he said, but that's the Greek translation. So to that answer, Yeshua says, not that's the correct answer, but he says, you spoke the truth. In other words, that's a true statement, but it's not the answer to your question about eternal life. And then he tells him the question that he really needs to have answered. And he says to the man, "Do this, and you shall live." In other words, he's saying, "Sir, you have no business asking about eternal life. You're already dead." Your job, should you choose to accept the assignment, is to acquire for yourself a human life, is what Yeshua is saying to the man. Do this. Yes. What is a human life? Anybody here ever held a newborn child? Go back to the moment. I'm going to ask you for a moment to actually assume the posture. How did you hold that newborn? Assume the posture. Go back to the moment where you held that newborn. Tap into its essence. And give me the word that comes to you that represents that child's essence. Love, purity, light, innocence, new beginning. Now, Jeannie and I have asked this question of tens of thousands of people all over the globe, and 100% of the time, everybody's answer is always some variation on the theme of love. Why is that? Because we all know what human life is. It is the active presence of love. And if you don't have one, then you need to listen to this passage in Luke 10:25. Every instant love is not active and present in you is an instant of death. Is an instant where your human life is covered up and not in awareness. Your job assignment, according to Yeshua, is not to say magic words to ask him to fix your life. In fact, to the people he's instructed, he said, "Why do you come calling my name, but you don't do what I tell you to do?" You'll notice there's a theology out there today that says, well, there's nothing you can do. You're just a hopeless, helpless sinner, and hey, say some magic words and then everything will be okay in your life. It's a lie. It's a fraud. It's not true. Yeshua says, I told you what to do. Why aren't you doing it? And this is his first instruction. Luke 10:25. You must love. You must, and let's go back and correct now the Greek translation there. Because the Greek translation indicates that love is a verb, something that you do. You got to love the Lord your God with all your... Go back to holding the newborn again. Is the newborn loving you, or is the newborn love? The newborn's not loving you. Love is not a verb. It's not something we do to each other. It's a state of being. The Greeks told you to do something. Love the Lord your God, as if it's a doing thing, and it's not. What he's saying here, what the Aramaic says, is not love God, neighbor as yourself, but rather it says there's a condition in the frontal lobes of the brain that's called rachma. Keep rachma active. It is a gateway for human life to enter a human form, and it keeps your mind on track with love rather than getting lost in the hostilities and fears of the world. And the two major objects of attention it suggests you need to maintain that state of being in the presence of is your neighbors And by the way, neighbor in Aramaic means anybody that you think about and the Creator. And then it doesn't say do that as you do it for yourself, because it's not a doing thing. It says maintain Rachma when you think of the Creator, when you think of neighbor, and then you will maintain your human life. You will have a human life if you keep that gateway open. And hostility and fear, you'll notice most people come into the world as that presence of love, and they knock the love out of them with hostility and fear and abuse and manipulation, and then they tell them to go out and find somebody to love them. And the insanity begins. You are the presence of love. Vladimir Lenin, very accurately in his writings, and he's probably responsible for more deaths on the planet than any other human being in history, said the way you destroy a culture is change the meaning of its words. Virtually every important word in our English language has been changed from its original meanings. Love is not a state of doing something, it's a state of being. If hostility or fear takes over your physiology, then just be able to acknowledge to yourself, I'm not human right now. And if I have to run out and smoke a joint or grab a fifth of scotch or whatever, suck down some nicotine, eat some junk food, then I'm reinforcing the hiding of what destroys my human life by the drugs that the culture offers. And we are the most drug-addicted society in history, I would offer. It's time for us to wake up. It's time for us to be able to accurately feel what's going on inside of us, and if it does not support the experience of the active presence of love, to learn to remove it. So what are the 5 keys that this man Yeshua gives us? The first one is the most important thing to know. What's the most important thing Yeshua offers us to know? There's a phrase that says, the eye is the lamp of the soul. If the light for you is darkness, how deep will your darkness become? Now, have you ever looked at that phrase and gone, if light is dark, light can't be darkness, that's silly. Maybe there's a mistranslation the Greeks gave us. Here's what he said in Aramaic. The perceptual constructs of your mind, your reality, your perception, not your eye, but it's the things that you think you see, your perception is the light or the guide for your earthly life. If the guide you follow is darkness, in Aramaic, hostility and fear are darkness. If what's guiding your behavior at any particular moment is based in hostility or fear, then your lights are out. How deep will your darkness become? Has anybody here ever done anything you regret? Go back to just one time when you did something that today you say, boy, I really regretted that happening. One time. And put a word to what you were feeling that motivated you to do what it is that you did. And give us your word.
Fear.
Fear. Anger. Frustration. Now, need. Now, this is another question Jeannie and I have asked of tens of thousands of people. And you know something? The word love has never shown up. I was in this loving, sweet, awesome, newborn innocent space. It's always hostility or fear. Hostility or fear compromises perception and knocks out your human life. How deep did your darkness become when you followed that mind? You got to stop following the mind of hostility or fear, and you've got to learn how to keep your lights on. Your human mind is designed to be plugged into the active presence of love. That's the only way it works. Anybody got a device in your home, your office, your shop, your car, that if you unplug it from its power supply, works really well? There is no such device. And the human mind is no different. It only fires properly when it's plugged into its power supply. And its power supply is a human life. Love. Really important to know that if your perception is filled with darkness, with hostility or fear, then your human life is blotted out. And it's not somebody else's fault that that's happening. The only one who can take responsibility for you staying connected to love and keeping your lights on, keeping your mind fueled properly is you. The world is not going to jump on your team in any big hurry. Fortunately, there will be people who will. Many of them are here this morning. But the world at large isn't interested in that. Really important to know that this thing's designed to function on love and not hostility and fear, not on darkness. The second key is the most important thing to do. The most important thing to do is to follow the first law. Now it's interesting, here's another word that the meaning has been destroyed. Law. Well, Michael, just give me the set of rules. We do a course called Laws of Living. Give me a set of the rules. No, that's not what law is in Aramaic. We've been taught in this culture a Greek idea that law is the rule of a superior, and if you don't obey the rules of the superior, somebody with a big gun's going to come and get you. In Aramaic, that's got nothing to do with law. There's no superior. God is not interested in you obeying. There are no laws to obey. Well, Michael, what are you talking about? Well, let's take an example we know. There's a thing called the law of gravity. Now, the law of gravity isn't written down somewhere. The law of gravity is something that happens. If you walk up to a cliff and you step off the cliff, the law of gravity doesn't say, should we break bones when they hit the bottom 2,000 feet down, or should we make it okay? There's no punishment. There's no violation. There's just the law of gravity. You don't fly heavier than air machines called airplanes in a way other than honoring the law of gravity. You got to know how it works. And if you work within its structure, you get to fly airplanes. If you're 30,000 feet up and you violate the law of gravity for 1 instant, the plane's going to drop out of the sky. And there'll be no punisher involved in that. If there is pain, if there is trauma, if there is poverty, if there's conflict in your relationships, guess what? It's a result of the violation of law. Because each of those arenas, there's a way that it works, just like gravity works. In the Aramaic, law, as opposed to the rule of a superior, is just, here's how it works. And so that first law was, you maintain that condition of Rachma. You maintain that gateway. And you keep your human life, the thing, the precious thing you were given at conception, in your structure 24/7, 365, whatever you need to do. Second key, maintain Rachma. Maintain that condition of love. The third key is the most important tool. I'd offer that the most important tool that Yeshua taught 2,000 years ago is the tool of forgiveness. And once you understand forgiveness, you will never speak of forgiving anyone ever again. Please stop forgiving people. Please stop forgiving yourself, because you can't. Again, the word meanings have been changed. We've been taught that forgiveness is about, well, I've got some pain inside of me, but it's all your fault, and it's okay, I'll be big about it, I'll forgive you. I'll let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me. If I let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me, have I done anything to change what's happening inside of me? Absolutely nothing. Now, if you don't ever learn to go in and remove what's happening inside of you, guess what happens? You get to live the title of our workshop this afternoon. Why is this happening to me again? Because you're a creator, and you create what happens in your life. Now, that's an idea everybody loves when the creation's going well. But when it's not going well, don't we always know who's to blame? Now, I like to do one thing of speaking in tongues when I speak, and so I'm going to do a speaking in tongue things right now. Tongues. And I'm going to just ask you to just be still for a minute while I just kind of tune in. And you're going to hear the name of the person that's the problem in your life, in your head. You know, the real speaking in tongues wasn't about somebody babbling in a foreign tongue and somebody else translating. It wasn't speaking in tongues. It was that the disciples were so clear with their message that everybody heard, no matter what language they spoke, the accurate message in their heads. So just tapping in. The person that needs to change for your life to get better, is their name by any chance them? You got somebody, if they'd be different, then you'd be okay? Liar, liar, pants on fire. Nobody needs to change for you to choose to have a human life. That's your responsibility. And the hostility or fear that you feel for only one reason. We've developed a test in this work for determining whether or not what you're feeling is yours or not. It's difficult, but you can apply it. How do you tell whether or not what you're feeling is yours or not? Are you feeling it? That's all you need to know. If you're feeling it because it's something inside of you. But you can pretend that it's caused by somebody outside of you. And that's called denial. Not a river in Egypt. But when I think or speak as though somebody outside of me is causing something that I am doing with my own mind to myself, then I'm in denial. And when I live in denial, when I think or speak as though somebody outside of me is the cause of what's happening inside of me, then I have to dissociate from the cause. I have to hide the cause from myself. And that cause is now no longer changeable until I undo my denial. I will literally dissociate from what I need to heal. And I'll find a whole procession of people who keep doing it to me. Forgiveness is not how I let you off the hook because something painful is happening in me. Yeshua would never invite anyone to do such a foolish thing as let somebody else off the hook for what was moving in them. Yeshua would guide them and hand them a tool called forgiveness with which they would go inside of themselves and remove the energetic root that they'd been hiding from themselves that is causing their pain. And those energetic roots, generally speaking, go back generations and generations and generations. Remember the story of the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years? Let's think about this for a minute. This is obviously a pretty bright group of people, right? And they're lost in a 30 square mile area for 40 years. Does that make any sense? No. He wasn't talking about a hot, sandy place. The desert is a code word in the scriptures for the unconscious. They were lost in their own unconscious dynamics, believing everybody out there. And the average person reaches about the age of 40 before they start to scratch their heads and go, gee, I've been through this 87 different times with 42 different people. Maybe I'm involved in my life. Maybe it isn't all about them. And they then start to embark on a journey. Each of you is here because you began to embark on that journey. Forgiveness is the technology that Yeshua developed 2,000 years ago. And it's absolutely brilliant, it's genius, and it's backward to what our culture teaches. That's the workshop we'll do this afternoon. How do you forgive? We'll actually do a forgiveness meditation that will give you the keys. So that's the third key. The fourth key is what's the most important block? Got to understand it. And the most important block is Satan. You've got to understand Satan. Now, the Greeks gave us these, insane pictures of this dude with the red suit, the pitchfork, and the tail. That's not Satan. In Aramaic, Satan means the resistor, one who misleads. Now, you'll notice if you're in some sort of upset or pain or trauma today, and I say, well, you've been through that 87 different times with 42 different people. Maybe that's your problem. Notice what you'll do. You'll go, no, Michael, it's not me. Let me tell you what the real problem is. This guy, Charlie. So now we're in resistance to the truth of we've created this every time we've experienced it. And we've got a mislead, a story about somebody else. Literally a perceptual hallucination that takes the content of our mind, makes pictures out of it, and makes it look like somebody else is the problem. Forgiveness collapses. Aramaic forgiveness collapses those pictures in on themselves and gives you access to the root energy that perhaps goes back 10, 20, 30 generations in your bloodline. This man Yeshua is no wimp to follow. He's inviting you in to do the work of healing all of the generations of your bloodline By the way, in 30 generations, if you do the math, each one of us has in excess of 1.7 billion people. The work is cleaning up the generations. Jonas Salk, creator of the Salk vaccine, said the most important thing you can do is to be a good ancestor. A good ancestor does not follow a culture that tells you pollute your genes at every turn, engage in all the rage and fear and hostility you want, blame and drama and trauma you like, have all the fun you can. No. It's about taking responsibility for this precious gift of our genetic heritage, adding to it a life based in the presence of love, removing from it everything unlike love, and passing it on to the next generation. How did the Jews get out of the desert? Do you remember what happened? They said the old generation died off. Now that didn't mean everybody in old physical bodies physically died. The root of the word generation is genari. It means cause. All of the old causes held in the genes had to go. That's how you get out of the unconscious state, where your perceptual mind tells you that everybody else is the problem in your life. The fifth key is the most important request to make. When you start realizing that some of the things you need to work through have been going on for perhaps more than 30 generations in your bloodline, there's some interesting Harvard research that says that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells fire, the max amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. 9 bits of data, 10,000 brain cells firing. It's been estimated we're in a 20 trillion bit world in that time frame. With a 9, and I use this not literally but metaphorically, with a 9-bit mind, do you think you can go in and clean up 20, 30, 40 generations of stuff? Never going to happen. But Yeshua taught in his original Aramaic that there was a feminine elemental force in us that was called Ruka Dekudsha. And Ruka Dekudsha was that elemental force that when invited into activity would undo the effects of our errors and teach us the truth. Remember, Yeshua said, you can deny me, but don't deny the one I came to connect you to. The words have been translated as the Holy Spirit, but there's nothing there in Aramaic about a disembodied spirit being. It's simply that there is literally an elemental force created by the Creator to heal you. You have free will. You don't have to do healing. You don't have to accept. You don't have to engage. You can say, I'm going to go my merry way to whatever the culture's taught me. Or you can recognize that there's a power in you that is willing to remove from you everything that never belonged in you. And guess what never belonged in you? Hostility and fear was not designed to enter the human form. How many times might I forgive? Well, when they said to Yeshua, is 7 worksheets 7 times? Is that enough? In Aramaic, his response was no, 77 times 70. It means that you will do an infinite amount of work until you're complete with your process. Cleaning up the generations is no wimp's task. It requires a deep commitment, a deep willingness to work. And so I invite you to just take a deep breath and let everything in you soften. And as it softens, another word for Ruka Dekudsha, for that feminine elemental force, is the breath. In Aramaic, it does not say God sent out his spirit. It said God sent out his breath. You'll notice that people in trauma and pain continuously hold their breath. Allow yourself to take a deep breath. And think about a situation in your life where there's just a really slight irritation or upset, not your big major life issue. but just something small. And notice that when you think about that irritation or upset, there's somebody, it might be yourself, or it might be someone else, that you want something from. There's a goal you have for them. You know, perhaps if it's your child being verbally abusive, you might say, I don't want my child to verbally abuse me anymore, but that wouldn't lead to healing. The goal you hold is for your child to speak to you lovingly, gently, respectfully. Goals drive perception. And in Aramaic, the word forgive is shabag, and it means to cancel. So with this minor irritation or upset that you have, I'm going to just invite you to notice that whoever the object of attention is, might be your spouse, might be a business partner, might be the government, might be a neighbor. Whoever the object of attention is, identify specifically the goal you hold for them. And then, and this may seem silly, we'll explain the total how and why of it in the workshop this afternoon, but I'm going to invite you to cancel that goal. I cancel my need for my child to speak to me lovingly, gently, respectfully. I cancel my need for my boss to give me that raise. I cancel my need for my neighbor to respect my privacy, whatever it is, and just cancel it. And as you cancel it, allow yourself to take a deep breath. There's that power in you that was called Ruka de Kudsha. I usually just short form it to Ruka. Invite that power. Breathe in deeply and invite that power to go to work in you and to remove whatever underlies the disturbance that's showing up in you in this situation. And once you complete this process, it doesn't mean you can't go back and reset that goal. But here's what happens. Our goals are the drivers for perception. When there's a particularly painful perception, and we cancel the goal, it drives it, the perception collapses. When it collapses in on itself and gives you the access to the hidden root of what needs to be healed. When you invite Ruka into that space, when you bring love present to that space, the exposure to the active presence of love automatically dissolves the underlying trauma. In Aramaic, that's forgiveness. No words about forgiving them or forgiving yourself or letting anybody off the hook. Just looking at the goal that drives painful perception in any situation where you're pained, and canceling that goal, collapsing the perception. As Yeshua said, in some circumstances, you may end up doing that 77 times 70 times before you finish with it. And your past generations will celebrate the healing they will experience from the work you do, and your future generations will celebrate that they don't have to carry that burden. You are made of the stuff called love. You were designed to live as the presence of love. Do this, and you shall live.